All right then. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I know we've had another session just before this, so probably a few people will join us as we go. But we'll get started. We've got 1 hour today, and Syed Arif Rahman from Karachi is online with us. He's a guest speaker today. Before we start talking about Arif and the subject, just a few housekeeping items. We have kept everyone on mute. I'll appreciate if you can also turn off your cameras just to make sure we don't eat up bandwidth unnecessarily. So it'll be myself and Arif talking throughout the session. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the chat feature. Arif and I will see if we can try to address them as he's talking, or maybe towards the end. Yeah, so let's get started about Arif. So I had the pleasure of being his batchmate in GIK. We're both from batch 9, started in 1999, graduated in 2003. Mashallah, now Arif runs Fortune Securities, which is a stock brokerage firm. And I'll let Arif talk a bit more about what he does and his whole journey. But before that, I just wanted to share just a little short story about Arif's passion for stocks. So he's been passionate about stocks and companies since a very long time. Even during the days of GIK, when he was studying electrical engineering. And I know the story from when we were there together. He used to get 6,000 rupees as his monthly pocket money from his parents. That was to cover his all his expenses. So the mess bill at that time was 2,800 rupees, and the remaining 3,200 rupees he had for everything else, including laundry and everything else that a student would need. And even out of that budget, Arif subscribed to Pakistan Stock Exchange daily newsletter that he would get. That was worth 1,200 rupees at the time. And so he would get this daily letter from Pakistan Stock Exchange giving him details about the day's trades and how it closed. So it has been his lifelong passion. He's been doing this since then. Obviously, he's progressed in his career. Now he has a team of people doing this kind of work. But thank you, Arif, for taking the time. The goal is that with the audience here in North America, we started with a lot of GKNs, and now we have a much larger diaspora who's joined us. So the idea is that people who are interested in investing, who are trying to learn investing in stocks, if you could help us take the first baby steps towards understanding the financial statements. And the statements we know, people who might have done an MBA or studied this in school, it requires a full course. And we're trying to shrink it in these 55 minutes that are left with us. So best of luck with that, Arif, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Umar. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. The days from GIK, I still remember, the kind of effort I used to put in understanding stock market at that point in time. I mean, I've come a long way, I would say, in terms of understanding how capital markets work and analyzing financials. Interestingly, after graduating from GIK, I immediately did my MBA from IBA in Karachi. And ever since then, I've been involved in valuing companies, working with brokerage houses. Then I worked with a bank in Dubai. Very briefly, I worked for a couple of years with a stock brokerage company in Pakistan called Elixir Securities. This was in 2003. Then in 2005, I got an opportunity to work with Standard Chartered Bank in Dubai. So I moved there. I worked with their M&A team for about 10 years, again, valuing companies, looking at mergers and acquisitions. Then in 2017, I decided to move back to Pakistan. And one of the reasons I made this decision was because I had already acquired this company called Fortune Securities, not entirely. I'm a 40% shareholder, 48% is owned by the current CEO of the company. And interestingly, the 8% shareholding of this company is owned by another batchmate of mine called Nabil Sheikh. So he's a batch niner and an 8% shareholder in this venture. So we both have jointly 48% in the company. Nabil doesn't work in this company. He's based out of Dubai. I am here now full-time working in Pakistan with the company in various roles because, once you have a company, you're not really, you don't stick to one role. You tend to do pretty much everything. So I'm running the sales department as well as business development, trying to help the research team. So do multiple things in this company. And then one reason, another very important reason I came to Pakistan was I saw that this brokerage business in Pakistan, and I heard Ali Farid, the session just before mine, talking about how little the penetration of retail investors in Pakistan is. So I saw this as an opportunity to be on the ground in Pakistan and really try and expand and see how much new additional business we can get in brokerage in Pakistan. So on the side, immediately after coming to Pakistan in 2017, late 2017, and joining Fortune Securities, we launched a kind of a startup called FinPocket. And the idea of this startup is to, facilitate retail investment through technology platform. So you can figure out, you can explore this application, which is available both on Android and iOS called FinPocket. It can help you access the stock market in Pakistan, just like KSB's K-Trade. So this is another application of that sort. Uh, we would like to tend to think that this is superior to anybody, any other application which is there in the market. Uh, but yeah, I mean, this is our own little, effort in the sense that we want to encourage more and more people to come into stock market investment in Pakistan. Okay, that's I think enough of a background on myself and what we do. I would like to jump to the topic what has been given to me. And Umar and Saad Bhai, they both said that since we've got a lot of GKNs who are great engineers and are doing wonderful thing in the technology space, financial statement is one area. I know some of you would have done your MBAs and know a little bit about financial statements, but I have tried to keep this presentation very simple, very basic, just so that it doesn't get very boring. It still is quite academic in nature because generally if I'm going to tell you what financial statements look like and how you have to analyze different numbers, it is going to become a little boring. But let's try and take whatever we can from this presentation. So I'm going to now switch to a brief presentation which I just made literally. It will talk about various financial statements and how you can get the maximum out of this presentation. So let me just share this.
Yes, Arif, we can see your screen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, fine. So, I mean, the first two logos you see on the front page are basically one for Fortune Securities, the brokerage firm which I run and work for. The other logo is for FinPocket, which is our technology platform. So you can go to the website and explore about these two companies. Okay, coming straight to the topic, what are financial statements? What are different kinds of financial statements, and what do they do? So basically, and we are going to limit ourselves here to listed companies because we can calculate much more and figure out much more about listed companies because availability of information is way more than a private company when we look at the financial statements. So there are three different kinds of financial statements. One is called the balance sheet, the other one is called the income statement, and the final third one is called the cash flow. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to stick myself to the first two, which is the balance sheet and the income statement, because cash flow is going to get a little complicated for this purpose. Balance sheet may so balance sheet is made at a certain point in time. What the balance sheet shows is how much a company's net worth is. So there are basically three components which we are going to see in our subsequent slides. One part of the balance sheet is what is the total assets a company owns. The other one is what are the obligations or liabilities or you can say borrowed amount a company has on the balance sheet. And the third one is what is the net amount left over for the shareholders, for the owners of the company. So any company which has particular amount of assets, they may not necessarily be owned through all of shareholders' equity. Companies generally borrow money and they buy assets. So this statement, which is called the balance sheet, it shows all of that. We'll go into the details for more understanding. Second statement is called the income statement. Income statement basically shows what happened during the course of a year. We are going to stick to year, although a lot of listed companies present their income statements on quarterly basis or half yearly basis. But let's just assume for this purpose that we are going to be dealing with yearly balance sheet and yearly income statements. So income statement shows if the, and for the purpose of this presentation, we are going to stick to profitable companies only. So income statement shows how much profit a company made during the course of a year. So the structure of an income statement is you start off with sales because that's the topmost priority. If you don't have sales, you don't make money. So sales is the topmost item there. And then obviously you start deducting your expenditures. And at the end, what you get is your profitability. So this is what an income statement is. Cash flows, hopefully in one of the next sessions, maybe Omar, we can talk about cash flows and really doing a deep dive into cash flows, because this one is slightly more complicated for a first presentation. Okay, as we were speaking, the balance sheet is made up of three key components. First is the assets, then you've got liabilities or borrowed money, and then in the end you've got equity. Now, what are assets? A typical balance sheet, for example, a manufacturing concern would have assets which will be plant and equipment. It will have property on its book. It will have vehicles, cars, trucks, inventory, some of the raw materials. So these are all the assets. Now, these assets are not necessarily all owned by the owners of the company, because a lot of these assets are very bulky in nature. They require a lot of money. So companies tend to try and borrow money and buy these assets. So that borrowed portion is called the liabilities. Simplistically put, a liability on a balance sheet would be short-term debt or a long-term debt, or an amount which is still payable or outstanding to a supplier. That also is a liability. And this fundamental equation which you can see at the bottom, is that all your assets are funded or are equal to your liabilities and your equity. So assets can be funded either through all of equity or through all of liabilities or through a mix of both equity and liability. Equity is that portion which the owner of the company has put into the company. And liability, as I explained, is that money which we have borrowed to buy those assets. So this equation at the bottom is the fundamental equation to read a balance sheet. And we will see a snapshot of a basic balance sheet to have further understanding on this.
Right. Sorry, Arif, before you continue, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
When you're sharing your screen right now, we can see the view where we see your next slide and the notes option. Can you try to get rid of that so we see the slide as a full on the full screen itself?
You can see the notes. Sorry.
Yeah, if you try to present again. I'll see if I remember how those settings work. Yeah, so this is fine.
This
we
is
can
fine
see.
now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is what I explained earlier, that your assets, they can be funded in only two ways. One is through the equity of the shareholders or the owners of the company. The other way you can fund your assets is through borrowing money or through supplier credit per se. A simplistic explanation of this would be, for example, if you go and say, for example, buy a car. Uh, Say, for example, in Pakistan, there's a car worth 3 million rupees. I don't have the money to buy a car on my own cash. So what I do is I put down a down payment, say a million rupees, which is the equity, and then I go to a bank and take on a bank debt. So the bank debt would be 2 million rupees. In this case, your asset you have created is 3 million rupees, whereas your equity is a million rupee, and you've got a liability of 2 million rupees. So that's how you create an asset. On the right, if you can see, I don't know if it is visible or not. This is a simple structure of a balance sheet. You've got assets. All the assets are listed down here: plant and equipment. You've got some investments. Say, for example, long-term investment. You invested in a company. You've got inventory. You've got your spare parts and tools. You've got some receivables. Receivables is that amount of money which you are supposed to get, from your sales. So sometimes you do credit sales and you are expected to take cash, say in 3 months time or 6 months time. So those are the receivables. And then obviously you've got some cash lying on your balance sheet also. So all these add up to your total assets, which in this case is 375 billion rupees in this example. Similarly, a company, as we mentioned, can take on liabilities, can take on debt to fund this asset. So in this case, we've got total liabilities which are worth 125 million rupees. Now the breakup of these liabilities are long-term loan, say for example of 60 million. Then you've got some short-term loan. Long-term loan is a loan which you don't expect to repay within a year. Short-term loan is something that you have to repay within 12 months time. So that's how this categorization works on the balance sheet. Then you've got some payables to suppliers. You've bought some equipment but you haven't paid on time, or you've got some credit which you are expected to pay in 3 months or 6 months, depending on what kind of credit you can take from the supplier. And then there are some other payables. So this all adds up to 125 million. Now, remembering this, the equation on the top, you can figure out what your equity would be. So your assets, which are worth 375 million rupees in this example, are funded through liabilities, which is 125 million. So the remaining amount, the difference between 375 and 125 million, is your equity. Now, equity is that amount of money which the owners of the company have initially put to the company, and over time, if the company has been profitable, those retained profits. So year after year, you make money. Obviously, if the company is making a lot of money, you tend to take some dividends out. But whatever is left and reinvested into the company shows up as retained earnings. So right at the bottom, if you see, you've got paid up capital of 100 million, which was the initial money which the owners of the companies invested into the company. And then you've got this 150 million rupee of retained earnings, which is accumulated profits since the inception of the company, and that amount of money which we have not taken out. So the profits could have been more than 150 million, but net of dividends, this is the amount which is still lying in the company. So if you add up 125 and 250, it becomes 375, and this is the source of your funding of your asset, which is 375. I hope this is clear. Okay, moving on. This is a little bit of more deep dive into the nature of balance sheet. So balance sheets are because this is a very simplistic balance sheet which I have on the right. If you look at the real ones, it'll be lengthier, it'll be slightly more complicated than this, but the basic principle remains the same. So you've got assets which are broken down between long-term assets and short-term assets. So long-term assets are those assets which you don't intend to sell or which you don't intend to liquidate within a year. So generally, these assets are your, for example, for a manufacturing concern, could be your plant and equipment, because you need your plant and equipment to generate sales. So those assets are called your long-term assets or non-current assets. Similarly, you've got some investments which you have made with a long-term view, with a long-term perspective, and you don't intend to liquidate that investment. So that will show up as part of your long-term assets. On the other hand, there are certain assets which are short-term in nature. For example, inventory. Inventory you generally keep because you are going to process that inventory and make it into a full and final product which you intend to sell later on. So this is something which is short-term in nature. So this shows up as part of your current assets. So simply put, you've got assets broadly categorized into your long-term assets and short-term assets, and the total sum is your total assets. Similarly, if we move to the next slide, you've got your liabilities, which are again divided between two long-term loans, long-term liabilities, and short-term liabilities. Long-term liabilities, again, I'll give you a basic example, is, for example, a long-term loan that you've taken. Long-term loan, by long-term loan, we mean that a loan which you don't intend to pay back in a year. So that shows up as part of your long-term liability. And similarly, your short-term liabilities are those liabilities which are maturing over the next 12 months. So it could be short-term loans because you don't necessarily need a long-term, a 3-year or 5-year loan. At times, you need a 6-month loan, a bridge financing to fix your working capital requirements. And similarly, your payables to certain suppliers are short-term in nature. Most of the time, they are short-term in nature because nobody will give you credit line for over a year. So you can purchase, say, for example, some inventory, and you can promise your supplier that I'll pay you back in 3 months' time. So this will show up as part of your short-term liabilities. In this example, if you can see, payable to supply, which are worth 25 million, or yes, 25 million here. So again, liabilities are broken down between long term and short term. So that's how the structure of your balance sheet is. Now, as I explained earlier, the shareholders' equity can again be split between two things. One is your paid up capital, the other one is your retained earnings. Paid up capital, simply put, is your initial investment into the company. When you start a company, you obviously put in some amount of money. So that shows up as your paid up capital. And then over years, if your company is profitable, it keeps on accumulating those profits and reinvest into the business. Those show that number shows up as part of the retained earnings. So in this example, if you can see, paid up capital is 100 million rupees and your retained earnings is 150 million. So you can clearly see that the company has been profitable over the last X number of years and has reinvested 150 million rupees of its profits back into the business. Now, this money is used to fund the expansion of the company, and by expansion of the company, we mean that the company is growing, it is buying more assets, and by buying more assets, what it does is it obviously is expanding its operations. So that's what balance sheet basically shows you.
So, Arif, if we're done talking about balance sheets, I saw a few questions that I thought maybe we can try to address right away. So,
Yeah, yeah, so absolutely.
yeah, so there was a question around depreciation and how does that work for assets?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, this is one topic which I was trying to create a slide, but then I thought, I'll leave it for later. So depreciation, very basically, what is an expense item. First of all, say for example that you start a business of manufacturing. Uh, let's say you're manufacturing motorbikes. Now, in order to manufacture motorbikes, what you need to do is buy a large plant and equipment. Say for example, you buy a plant equipment worth 2 billion rupees. Now there is a certain life associated with that plant. That plant cannot keep running for the rest of its life for n number of years. There is a certain time limit after which that plant will become obsolete and you will need a replacement. So again, without going into too many details, you can put down a number for that plant, the useful life of that plant. Say, for example, 10 years, that after 10 years, I will probably need to replace this. So 2 billion rupee worth of expenditure has to be amortized or depreciated or expensed out over 10 years. There are various methods of depreciation. The simplest one is the straight line depreciation, where what you do is you take the initial investment amount, which is 2 billion, and you divide it by number of years, the useful life of that plant, which is 10. So every year you are incurring an expense of 200 million. This is the reason you do it like this is because you don't want to show 2 billion rupees upfront as an expense on your income statement. However, what you do is you create an asset on your balance sheet worth 2 billion rupees, and after every year you depreciate it by 200 million rupees and you show the net amount. So after year one, the value of the asset will become 1800 million, and so on. After second year, it will become 1600 million. Whereas on the income statement, because this depreciation is an expense item, it will show up as an expense line item, although non-cash because you've already paid cash. But still, for the purpose of accounting and the way accounting rules work, you have to show this 200 million as an expense item on your income statement.
Okay. Now there are a couple of questions on equity. So the question says that is revaluation surplus and also share premium, are they considered part of equity?
Absolutely. So share premium is a slightly more complicated subject. But for example, you started a company with say for example 100 shares, and there were two shareholders who held 50 shares each. Each share was worth, say for example, $100. So 100 times 100, $10,000. That's what you invested initially in the company. Now, later on, there was a requirement, say, for example, after a year, to invest more money into the company. Now, the value of the company has gone up because the company has started operational. It's operational. It has started producing profitable, product, and there is a third investor now coming into the company. Now, you don't want to give, the new investor same number of shares for the same amount of money which you initially invested. So, for example, you want the new investor to come in, pick up, say, X number of shares, but you're not going to give him the shares for $10 each or the $100 each, which was the initial investment done by the founding shareholder. So you will give him at a certain premium. That premium over and above the initial value is taken up as premium. Uh, 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 as a premium, and it shows up as a shareholder's equity, because that is actually new shareholder coming into the company and paying a premium over and above the initial investment. So that shows up as part of the equity. Second question on the revaluation surplus. What revaluation surplus shows is, and this is again, it really depends on which geography we are operating in. In Pakistan, there is a requirement to do a revaluation of your assets after every 3 years. So, for example, if I've got a company and taking an example of Fortune Securities, we've got a property which we own and where we operate. Now, after every 3 years, there is a requirement from the regulator to revalue our premises, and if there is a appreciation in value, we have to report it. Similarly, if there is a depreciation in value of a property, then we also have to record it. So revaluation means that, for example, if the value of the property was, say, for example, 10 million rupees, and after 3 years, we do a market survey, and accountants and our auditors are a judge of that. They find out that the value of this premises has gone up to, say, 50 million rupees. The 5 million rupees will show up as a surplus on revaluation. And again, this becomes part of the equity because our value of the initial asset has gone up.
Okay. Thank you, Arif. I think we can move ahead.
Okay. Okay, now these are, I mean, you can count, you can calculate like a billion different ratios from balance sheet, but I just felt that, these three ratios will make, life easy for everyone and are probably the most important ratios, or at least I consider them to be very important when looking at the balance sheets. It becomes slightly more complex, but let's try and, decode this. One is debt to equity. It's nothing but debt is the borrowed amount, the borrowing which a company has done over years. So debt is, it can be short-term debt, it can be long-term debt. You pick up all that debt, add it up, and you divide that number with the equity of the company. What it shows is that, how leveraged a company is, how risky or less risky the operations or the balance sheet of the company is. The higher this number, if you got more debt and less equity, obviously it becomes a riskier company. Similarly, if your debt levels are low and your equity base is big, then it leaves a lot of room for the company to grow because it can borrow and it can buy new assets. So really, debt to equity is one ratio which you need to consider when looking at the financial statements and looking at investments into different companies. The other one is the current ratio. Current ratio is nothing but we went through what current assets are and current liabilities are. So current ratio is all your current assets divided by your total current liabilities. Basic idea of this ratio is that because current liabilities are those liabilities which you need to pay within the next 12 months. So there is an immediate obligation on part of the company to settle those liabilities. And if you don't settle those liabilities, then the company's operation can be hindered. So this ratio gives you an idea that how liquid the balance sheet is. So you need to have good amount of current assets to support your current liabilities. For example, a ratio of 1 would mean that your current assets and your current assets are those assets which are can be easily liquidated, can easily be sold, and you can raise cash from those assets. So that number is enough to settle your liabilities. The higher the number, the bigger this number, the more comfortable you can be investing in the company, because you know that current liabilities are not high and your current assets are more than enough to settle your current liabilities over the next 1 year. And then you've got book value per share. Book value per share is a very interesting multiple, especially for financial sector. It's also quite important for other companies, not just financial sector, but for financial sector, this is one of the key ratios that one has to look at. How it is calculated is you pick up your entire shareholders equity. So shareholder equity, as we learned earlier, is your paid up capital and your retained earnings. You take up that number and you divide it by the number of shares of the company, and the number that you get is the net worth of the company on per share basis. Now, why is this important? Is because, for example, your book value per share of company X is say 25 rupees, and you look at the market value of that company, it comes to say, for example, 40 rupees. Then you know that in case, God forbid, if the company collapses and something happens, in the case of liquidation, what you're going to get is 25 rupees on your investment. So that 40 rupee market value may not hold, and you are protected by the book value per share. So that's what you're going to get. At times, value investment also means that you're identifying companies where the market price of the share is at a discount to the book value. And trust me, there are a lot of companies in Pakistani market where the market value is way below the book value per share, which means that in case the company winds up its operation, you're going to get way more than what you actually paid in the market for that company. So that's why this book value per share is the key metric. Now, this is some examples. I don't know if you want to go through them, but I'll share this presentation with everyone, and they can have a look at it and see how all these ratios are being calculated. Umar, is that fine, or do you want me to go through this?
We've got 25 minutes left, Arif, so you can judge if we need to go into this detail right now. I'm getting a few questions, so I'm thinking maybe we can skip this and talk about income statements.
Sure.
And
sure.
Then we can see if time permits, we can go into some examples, maybe when we're trying to answer some of the questions.
ठीक है. Okay. So, I mean, this was one example I created on my own, this hypothetical numbers. This is a real life example. So I've, inserted a balance sheet from a company which is listed on Pakistan Stock Exchange called International Steels Limited. It produces flat steel, one of the two companies in Pakistan. And again, I've calculated ratios on the side just to show you how it is all being done. And you look at this. I mean, I don't know if it is visible or not, but I'll share this presentation with Umar, and you can circulate this to whoever wants this. Okay, coming to income statement. Very simplistically put, the equation right at the bottom. This is what an income statement structure is. You start off with your sales, because without sales there is no company. So you need to earn something, and from that what you need to subtract are a bunch of items. Number one is your cost of goods sold, because you are going to produce something and earn revenue. Obviously, you're going to incur some expenses. You need some raw material. You need to manufacture that. You're going to be using power, electricity, whatever. So that all comes part of the costs. Then obviously there is human involvement in every company. So you subtract your salaries. Then if the company has some borrowing, you will need to be paying on that borrowed amount. That is called the interest cost of financial charges. And then right at the end, what you need to be subtracting are the government taxes. So in Pakistan, for example, corporate taxes are 35%. So whatever you earn, you need to pay 35% to the government. And what is left is called profit after tax, which is the real profit with the owner of the company, with the owner of the company owns, basically. So that's PAT or profit after tax. These are, very, I think, we don't need to go into the details of these definitions, sales and costs and salaries and interest costs. So I've explained them here. But this equation right at the bottom is something which you will need to refer. Again, coming to an example, simplistic example, you've got sales of 2,500 million, you've got costs of 1,500 million, and what you get is you subtract your costs from your sales and you get to your gross profit. So that's the first, line item on your income statement, which measures profitability, because you need to have a positive gross profit to be a profitable venture. If you are not making gross profit, a positive gross profit, obviously you are not going to last for a very long time. Then from gross profit, you subtract your admin expenses and your salaries and your distribution expenses, head office expenses. What you get to after subtracting these is called your operating profit. These are all important items because later on we are going to be calculating some ratios which need gross profit and operating profit and PBT and EBIT. So I'll explain them later, but this is how the structure of the income statement looks like. Then after operating profit, what you need to be subtracting are your financial charges. At the end, what you get to is PBT, which is profit before taxes. And after this, you pay taxes to the government, which generally, depending on region to region, in Pakistan, it's about 35%. So you get 35% on your profit before tax, and what you are left with is your PAT, which is called profit after tax. Now, out of this number is what a company can declare dividend from. Generally, companies which are growing companies, they don't tend to pay a lot of dividends because they see that retaining these earnings back into the business and creating new assets and expanding operations will create more value for the business, for the shareholders. So they tend to retain earnings. But some companies which do not find a lot of growth opportunities or growth potential, they tend to pay it out, all of their profits as dividends to the shareholders. Okay, again, as we discuss some of the ratios for the balance sheets, these are some of the key ratios which one can calculate using an income statement. Again, there are
Arif, these ratios that we're looking at, we saw some in the balance sheet, and now you're talking about income statement. They don't show up in the financial statements, right?
Absolutely. Sorry, I mean, I forgot to mention this. So these are ratios which an investor or somebody who is analyzing a company for the purpose of investment or valuation needs to calculate himself. I mean, there are various tools available, but these ratios don't show up on the income statement. You need to figure them out yourself, and that was the whole idea of telling you that these are certain numbers which you need to calculate. And then later on, we'll talk about the time permits, how to value, which company sees better if the GP margin is X amount. So comparable analysis can be done based on these ratios. But yeah, these numbers are not available on the income statement or the balance sheet. Okay, so this GP margin or gross profit margin is nothing but your gross profit divided by your total sales. This tells you how profitable or how profitable incremental sales are. So a company with a GP margin of say 40% would imply that for every $100 of sales, what you are getting is to the company is $40 in gross profits. Again, operating margin, as I'll just show you that operating profit is one line item below the gross profit once you have taken out your admin expenses and selling and distribution expenses. So operating margin is one level below the gross profit level. Obviously, if your GP margin is say 40%, your operating margin cannot be more than 40%. It has to be lower because your operating profit is lower than your gross profits because you have taken out some certain expense items from your gross profit level. So operating margin is your operating profit divided by your sales. I've just quoted, one company here, for example, Apple. In the last 5 years, its operating margin averaged 27%, which is very high. Generally, operating margins are in the teens for normal manufacturing companies. Now, Apple being it's a tech company with a USP, unique selling proposition, so it's able to make 30% kind of operating margins. Now, EBITDA margin, EBITDA I'll come to later, but EBITDA margins are nothing but you add back your depreciation. And it was good that Omar, you asked me a question on depreciation, because depreciation is a non-cash item. If you want to really see what cash margins are like for a company, what you do is you calculate your EBITDA margins. EBITDA means earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Amortization is nothing but depreciation for items which are not physical. So for A, just assume it's depreciation. So what you do is basically you calculate your operating profit, you add back depreciation to it. That's how you get your EBITDA, and then you're comparing your EBITDA to your sales. So you take EBITDA as your numerator and sales as your denominator, and you calculate your EBITDA margins. So these first three things, GP margin, operating margin, and EBITDA margin, they tell you different levels of profitabilities. In each one of these cases, sales is your denominator, whereas the operating profit or the gross profit and EBITDA is your numerator. So this basically it gives you a fair bit of an idea how profitable a business venture is. Last ratio, which I felt was important in terms of understanding of an income statement, is your interest coverage ratio. Interest coverage is it's basically your financing costs which a company is paying, and in certain cases, interest costs can be very, very high. So with interest coverage, what we're trying to figure out is that how comfortable a company's operations are in terms of paying its financing cost on time. So sometimes when your margins of your business really go down, it becomes really difficult for a company to honor its financial commitments. For example, in the case of from recent past, I'll tell you that in Pakistan, a lot of cement companies expanded their capacities, and what happened simultaneously was, because they were expanding, they took on a lot of debt, and over the last couple of years, leaving the last few months aside, interest cost really went up. The KIBOR rate in Pakistan went up from say 6.5% to 14.5%. So interest cost really went up, and the margins on cement business went down. So it became really difficult for these companies to honor their interest on time. So what interest coverage tells you is that how comfortable our operation is, what times of your interest payments are you generating as profits. Simply put, what it does is you take your operating profit and you divide that operating profit with your interest expense. So for a simplistic example would be an operating profit of 100 and interest expense of say 20. So in this, you can see that you are 5 times covered. Your operating profit is 5 times than what you are supposed to pay in interest cost. But on the other hand, if your operating profit comes down, you're not doing enough sales and your margins get squeezed, your operating profit comes down from say 100 to 25. Now you're really stretched because you are making only $25 of profit in order to finance, in order to pay your financing cost on time. You are paying $20 out of that $25. So you're only left with $5 for the shareholders as profit. So this is what interest coverage shows you. Again, here, what I've done is I've just taken a simplistic example of an income statement and calculated these ratios. Umar, again, I think the audience can have a look at this later on, because I think I've explained these ratios in detail, and this is just this calculation of these ratios.
Okay.
Again, this is a real life example. I picked this one company, High Noon Laboratories. It's a pharmaceutical company in Pakistan. Very profitable, fast growing company. This is there from the recent financials. So very quickly we can see, calculating GP margin. You've got gross profits, which is the third line item. So in 2019 they made 4.16 billion in GP on sales of 9 billion. So your GP margin using the formula is 46%. This is very, very high. Now operating margin, again, you see operating profit is given on the income statements. If you can see, operating margin is about 1.3 billion rupees. So operating margin is your 1.3 billion divided by your total sales. So operating margin of 14, slightly over 14%. Now EBITDA margin, EBITDA is one number which is not given on the income statement, but this is one number which I think investors need to really look at, although it requires a little bit of deep dive into the notes and the financial statements, because depreciation number is not given in one place. You have to figure out where the depreciation numbers are. And as I mentioned earlier, EBITDA is nothing but your operating profit, and you add back your depreciation to it. So depreciation can be extracted from looking at various notes. Generally, depreciation is hidden in cost of goods sold. It is hidden in your admin expenses, and you add back that depreciation to your operating profit. You get to EBITDA, and then you calculate your EBITDA margins. So EBITDA divided by sales is your EBITDA margin. Okay, this what I did was I took out those notes specifically just to show how depreciation is hidden in the notes. Now, these are not part of the main financial statements, what you see on this slide. These are notes to the accounts. And as I was saying that, depreciation can be in various places. So one place where you can see your depreciation is your cost of sales. So here you can see, I don't know if you can read this, it's about 64 million in cost of sales. Then another part of depreciation is included under distribution, selling, and promotional expense. So there's another 40 million worth of depreciation hidden there. So yeah, I mean, a little bit of effort is required, but you can, it's not that difficult. You just need to pick out depreciation from these places, add it back to your operating profit, you get to your EBITDA. Yeah, this slide basically what I'm trying to explain here is that on absolute basis, debt over equity or debt to EBITDA or your gross profit margins do not tell you a lot of things. Because these numbers can really vary depending on which sector you're looking at. For example, debt to equity for a technology company or for a startup has to be really low. And the reason for that obviously is that a startup or a technology company, they don't take on a lot of debt, number one. Secondly, a lot of bankers or creditors, they don't take on risk and give debt to these companies. So debt to equity for technology companies can be low. So it will be wrong to compare debt to equity for a startup with a company which is into manufacturing or is much more established. Again, on the other end of the spectrum, you have utility companies, for example, Karachi Electric or PSO, which have established businesses and have been profitable over a number of years. In those cases, you will see debt to equity to be a little high. So that's the entire spectrum of how debt to equity can really vary. Again, GP margin can also vary from sector to sector. In a recent example where we saw GP margins being 40% for a pharmaceutical company, that's really high. But if you move to more, mundane or brick and mortar kind of business like, flat steel manufacturing or Keyser manufacturing, say for example, or air conditioner manufacturer, there you will see GP margins to be really thin in the range of 10 to 12%. Whereas GP margins for companies which have unique selling proposition of unique product of which no other company can make, their GP margins can be high. So again, it can be misleading to compare different companies in different sectors and comparing with GP margins. Yeah, just to highlight this point, again, these numbers are just for illustrative purposes. These are not real numbers. So I'll tell you in the first table, these are all the pharmaceutical companies. You can see that, these AGP, High Noon, GlaxoSmith, Abbott, Sirle Pakistan, you see the average GP margin in the first row being 39%, whereas, some of these companies like AGP have got much higher GP margin than the average. Whereas in the table on the bottom, you see GP margins for some of the manufacturing companies which are listed on Pakistan Stock Exchange. TGL is a glass manufacturing company. They make float glass for building. ISL is a flat steel manufacturer. Park Electron. Then you've got Waves, which manufactures ACs and refrigerators. Then you've got Honda Car, which makes Honda Civic and Honda City in Pakistan. So these are some of the manufacturing companies, and you can see that average GP margin for these companies is way below than the pharmaceutical companies. So it will be wrong to compare GP margins of one sector with the other one. Yes, what you can do is you can figure out which one is a better pharmaceutical company by looking at the average GP margin of that sector and the GP margin of that particular company. So for example, in the case of pharmaceutical companies, we can see that AGP's got the highest GP margin. Similarly, operating margin wise, again, AGP is better off compared to rest of the companies. And amongst the manufacturing sector, you can see that TGL, Tariq Glass Limited, and Honda Car have got a higher GP margin compared to the rest of the sector. So that's how you compare, these different margins.
So Arif, is there any are there any sources where people can get this kind of an analysis, like Yahoo Finance, or is there any publicly available information on Pakistani listed companies?
Yeah, I mean, recently, what PSX has done is they've created this data portal called dps.psx.com.pk. It's very, very good. Until about a year back, Pakistan Stock Exchange website used to be really crappy, but now they've really done a good job. So you can get some of these ratios, not all of these, but it's quite detailed, and you can enter the company that you want to look at, and then all these ratios and recent historical financial, they'll show up. So you can do a good comparison analysis using this website.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, so far what we've covered is we've talked about the balance sheet, we've talked about the income statement. Another very important thing which I wanted to highlight here is the notes to the financial statements. This is something which a lot of people don't appreciate much. Even some of the analyst community, people in the investment, they don't really go through the notes. Reason number one is because they are very detailed. Bulk of your annual report or your annual accounts are made up of notes. At times, for example, a company like Honda can have 100 and 120 pages worth of notes. So really, to go through each and every note is quite cumbersome. It's quite it's a tedious exercise, but it is very, very important, because in those notes are hidden some of that information which can be very meaningful from investment perspective. Um, so without going into a lot of detail, just I wanted to highlight what kind of information that you can find in those notes. The box at the bottom shows you some of these things. So generally there's a certain standard set format in which these notes are published. One is, first note is about what a company does, then you go into the main accounting rules, then the question which Omar you asked earlier, the depreciation method used, what kind of depreciation the company is charging, inventory. I don't know if I want to go into the details of LIFO and FIFO, last in first out and first in first out, for inventory recording purposes. So there's a whole lot of information which is available in the notes. So it really is up to the investor. If he wants to really put in serious amount of money into a company, it's very, very advisable to actually spend some time and actually go through the notes, at least some of the important ones. The next few slides I've just laid out what notes look like. So for example, the first note is about the corporate information. So where is the plant base, what does the company do, what are its products, where are the factories situated, so all this information is there in the notes. Another piece of information could be, this is one line item, trade and other payables. If you look at the balance sheet, the total sum number is just one line item in the balance sheet. It does not lay out all the details. All the details you have to go into the notes and then figure out, the split, the breakup of these trade and other payables. So all these other, the detailed information is mentioned in the notes.
So Arif, for people like people who have full-time jobs and who do not have time to go through notes of all the companies that you're interested in, what do they do?
That's why you have to get in touch with good investment advisors. So that's what investment advisors are for. And then secondly, for example, brokerage houses like ours, not all brokerage houses, but some of the big ones, the top 15, 20 ones, they have their own research team. So we've got a research team of about 5 people, and they have their own sectors which they tend to cover. And the idea of having these research analysts is to actually go into the details of these companies and figure out what the right valuation of a certain company is. So it is their job to do a deep dive into the financial statements, look at the notes, then come up with a valuation and their own assumption as to what the company's true value is, and then accordingly advise people like you who don't have time for this kind of detailed analysis.
Yeah. So we're running out of time now. We've got 4 minutes left, Arif. If you have some other topics to discuss,
yeah,
then
so
let's quickly run through them.
Let me just quickly wrap this up through these are some of the notes which I wanted to show you, but that's fine. You can have a look at this in detail later. I just wanted to quickly go into the valuation. I mean, this is the right way to wrap this up would be to give you a very, very high level. I mean, don't take this as hard and fast that this is how it will work, but high level analysis of what cheap company is and what an overvalued company is. So some of the ratios that I'm sure a lot of investors would have heard about and have been using on daily basis are the price earning multiple and price to book multiple. What are these exactly? So price to earning multiple is nothing but what multiple you're paying for every dollar of earning. So for example, if your company is making $1 and the company share trades at $15 in the market, the price to earning multiple of that company is 15. So for every dollar you're paying $15 to buy that company. Similarly, in a similar sector, you've got this other company which makes $1 in earnings but trade at $9 a share. So keeping everything else constant, you can see that this other company is cheaper. The $9 company is cheaper because for every dollar of earning, the value of the company in the market is only $9. That's a very simplistic analysis of what a PE multiple is. Similarly, price to book multiple is another multiple which is really useful when you're analyzing financial institutions like banks or insurance companies, because those companies, those the real value of those companies lie in the net worth or the shareholders' equity of those companies. So a price to book multiple of say 1 versus price to book multiple of 0.6, the 0.6 company is cheaper because for every dollar of book, you're paying that company $0.6 in the market, whereas the other company, for every $1 book you're paying $1 in the market. So the lower this number, the better, both in the case of P multiple and price to book multiple. And similarly, there are two other multiples, and with this I'll wrap it up. Are EV to EBITDA and EV to sales. Now, enterprise value is something which I'll try and explain this very simplistically here. It's nothing but your total market cap, and market cap is the value of the company. So you would have heard in Bloomberg and other news places that the value of the company has gone up to $120 billion in XYZ. So that's what the market cap is. But to calculate your enterprise value, what you do is you take the market cap, you add all the debt which is there on the balance sheet, and you subtract the cash. Now, don't ask me, why we do all this, but just remember that this is what the enterprise value is. And the reason that we calculate enterprise value is because these two ratios which I showed below, EV to EBITDA and EV to sales, they require these enterprise value. EBITDA, we calculated earlier, is your earnings before your interest, tax, and depreciation. Sales is sales. So again, if lower the EBITDA multiple and lower the EV to sales multiple, the better the company is or cheaper the company is. Again, you have to be careful that you're analyzing these ratios for companies in a similar sector. You cannot compare EV EBITDA of, say, for example, an Apple to EV EBITDA of a Shell or a BP. It would be completely different. So you need to be comparing these ratios for companies in similar sector.
Arif, we're at the top of the hour, and there's a suggestion that we can extend this current discussion by a few more minutes. So would you have the time to maybe extend this by another 10 minutes?
Yeah, sure. We can. I mean, okay. I've almost finished with my slides here. Okay. There was just one wrap up, which I thought would be helpful. I've just put down the summary. What we did in the lecture today. It's kind of a very academic lecture. I hope I'm not boring a lot of people, but so what we learned was what are the key financial statements, the balance sheet, the income statement, and the cash flow. Cash flow we did not go into detail because it requires a lot more deep dive into the numbers. But balance sheet and income statement, I hope I've been able to clarify you what these statements are and what they show and what they represent.
Yeah.
Some of the ratios, which there are a few dozen ratios that you could calculate using a balance sheet, and again a few dozen that you can calculate using an income statement. But some of the key ones we calculated, and I've shared this in this presentation how you can calculate them. And yeah, so equally important, besides these financial statements, are your notes to the accounts. Notes to the accounts show you a lot more than what simple balance sheet or income statement show you. So one investor needs to be mindful of looking at these notes, because they show you a much bigger, much clearer picture of the company. And finally, we talked about some key ratios to analyze companies, which are, a P multiple and price to book multiple, and similarly EV to EBITDA and EV to sales.
Yeah. Great, thanks, so, Arif. There's so many questions. I don't know where to really start. It is a very technical subject that we're discussing, and I'm sure we'll not be able to do justice to the depth that it really demands. And I guess it's past midnight in Pakistan as well, so I don't think we'll be able to stretch this a lot. Sorry, there's somebody at the door. What we can do, Arif, is that there are some suggestions on some future sessions.
Sure.
Some people are suggesting that we probably just extend today's discussion into cash flow statement, as you had mentioned, and probably by going with a few example financial statements of companies, and then trying to assess and see which one in your opinion would be a good buy worthwhile investing at any given time. So that's one suggestion. A few other being discussed in different forums as well. Um, I guess with this we'll probably have to wrap up the discussion, unfortunately. So thanks everyone for participating in this session. We could not get to all the questions. There were so many of them, and we're really out of time. What we'll try is I'll try to consolidate the questions that we've had in the chat and see if we can try to address them afterwards, either in a different session or maybe through the WhatsApp chats if possible. So with that, Arif, do you have any closing remarks? I see you've highlighted your company again on the slide deck.
Yes.
Um, uh, so the audience primarily is outside of Pakistan and interested in investing, interested in their financial well-being, interesting to learn more. So thanks for your time, and with that I'll just hand it over to you to say any final comments. Arif, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Umar. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for the session. I mean, I would really love to, have a subsequent session. And whatever you guys suggest me, we can have another session on this. Maybe a further deep dive into income statement, a deep dive into valuation, or a deep dive into cash flow statement. So we can have multiple topics for later sessions. So yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
wonderful.
And
Really appreciate it. So the topic today was a bit pedantic, but I know you're a very hands-on kind of a guy. So we'll probably try to use your time better by exploring how we can use your knowledge on investing in Pakistan. So less academic and probably more hands-on kind of subjects as well. So
okay,
thanks a lot,
sounds good.
Arif, and thanks a lot to all the audience as well. You've been very patient. It was uh, uh, the subject required a lot of attention, and I saw that a lot of you did. So really appreciate that, and thanks to the organizers who are organizing these events, and hope to have more of these in the future. So with that, we'll wrap up today's session. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your evening or day wherever you are.
Okay, thanks
Allah
a lot.
Hafiz.